If I've said it once, I've said it a million times probably. There is no one way to heal in recovery. Each one of us bring our own unique set of life experience to the table that sets our journey apart from everyone else's. This is why I have a very hard time with blanket recovery programs that claim addiction is addiction, and if you do it this way, you'll be successful. No deviation. I've seen guys turn to poetry, writing music, yoga, screenplay, painting, etc., that heals their heart and soul in deep ways that only they could explain. Find out what works for you. This is the beauty of recovery, empowering yourself to connect with who you are, your values, and your own distinct healing modality. Today's guest has not used meth, but creates these incredibly powerful graphic novels and comic books about the chemsex scene among men who have sex with men. I was shocked to learn that he hadn't used because they are incredibly accurate, except for a few little things, which we discussed in the podcast. And it's also amazing that this is a reflection of the British chemsex scene that is exactly what we see over here in the chemsex scene among men who have sex with men. I really never witnessed this type of representation of the underground world that so many of us have experienced. These comic books are raw and definitely uncensored, but tell the story of chemsex in the LGBTQ plus community. Ed is a storyteller, and you'll hear about his own personal healing journey and why he is dedicated to bringing light to the subject. He is on the front lines of saying, hey, there is an epidemic going on in our community and we need to do something about it. And he is in a very impactful way. And I hope that you are encouraged to tell your story after hearing our conversation today. And I pray that you feel seen and heard and inspired to join us in getting attention paid to, as he says, the biggest healthcare crisis in the queer community since AIDS. Enjoy. The AfterMeth Podcast is an outreach tool to help men who have sex with men break free from the addictive patterns associated with chemsex, otherwise known as crystal meth or TINA. I'm your host, Dr. Dallas Bragg, a former crystal meth user, now recovery coach. Here you will find a repository of tools and resources intended to eradicate the epidemic that is plaguing our MSM population. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are not to be taken as medical advice. Also, we will be talking about drugs and sex, so if you feel triggered to use, stop listening and contact your local emergency system and or your support network. Let's go. All right, welcome back to the AfterMeth Podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you are a new listener, welcome. If you've been with us for a while, welcome back. Appreciate you and your support of this podcast. Season 2 is been so fun so far, and I actually moved in the middle of it. And I was listening to a few of the recent podcasts, and it sounds like I'm screaming. So I'm working on the sound quality, is what I'm trying to say. It sounds like I'm literally just screaming when you try to listen back. So I am backed away from the microphone on this one. I'm watching the tone of my voice so that I'm not screaming in your radio or your ears or your headphones, whatever it is, however you take in this podcast. Don't forget, there is a supplemental study guide that comes along with every podcast. The link will be in the show notes, or you can get it by email if you subscribe to my blog, and it is at drdallasbragg.com. There is a free Facebook community, the AfterMeth Podcast community. You can join there for free and interact with us. I ask your advice on podcast topics, or how do you like the podcast so far? What do you want to hear? We also support each other on our recovery journey. You can watch this podcast on YouTube, the AfterMeth Podcast. If you try to search for me for this podcast, make sure that you do not let the phone autocorrect to aftermath. It will do that because aftermath is not a word. So make sure it doesn't do that, or you will not find me. I hear it all the time. I can't find you. You're nowhere. I'm like, well, I'm actually everywhere. But you have to change the A to an E. Yes. So be sure to share the podcast on your social medias as well, if you can, your stories or whatever. I would love to get the algorithm, breaking this podcast out to more people who want to hear it. Today, we're talking to a very talented gentleman named Ed, and we're talking about storytelling in recovery. Let me just introduce Ed before we let him speak. Ed Firth is the East London artist and writer behind the Pound Shop Zine Cycle. So if you don't know what a zine is, it's just a smaller niche magazine. I didn't know. I had to I had to Google a lot of words in your profile, in your about. I didn't know what Pound Shop, but Pound Shop is kind of your brand, right? I saw cards, I saw prints, I saw ceramics, I saw all kinds of things, and we'll get into that in a little more. And the ongoing Horny and High anthology comic series is exploring British chemsex subculture among gay men in 2010's London. Volume 1 was shortlisted for the Myriad First Graphic Novel Competition out of 115 entries, and described by queer comics legend Ralph Koenig as telling a truth only the bowels can understand. But when we get into this, you'll understand what he's saying. That Ed has told a truth in these graphic comics that only those who have experienced it, oddly enough, he hasn't completely, but will understand. Volume 2, Attitude magazine said subject matter, storytelling, and sheer artistry collide with exquisite dexterity. The endless chase of the high, the cruel psychosis of come down, powerfully captured here. It's incredible work. It really is incredible work. A graphic novel reviewer from a left-wing broadcast said, too graphic for a family newspaper. In 2022, his autobiographical comic, The Lift, placed second in the Observer Faber and Faber graphic short story competition. And recently, he was declared by Broken Frontier as one of their 6 to watch emerging small press creators in 2023. Volume 1 and 2 of High and Horny are now available in Germany in a translated edition. That's really nice. Via the published house Salzburg, sorry, I can't say this word. Even though I practiced it, I cannot say this word, but Butchvarlard. That is the most butchered pronunciation that I could come up with. And in the U.S., through Northwest Press, I was able to order and had delivered to my home. He is currently writing Volume 3 of High and Horny in between portrait and illustration commissions and running East London Life Drawing, established in 2015, as well as volunteering for Controlling Chemsex as a support key worker, supporting people making changes in their life around sex and drug use. All right, Ed, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Dr. Dallas. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yes, it's nice to meet you. So glad to have you, and so glad to offer something that's so unique. I just, we've been on the Zoom calls for Controlling Chemsex for a while, but I had no idea there was this whole production behind you and what you did until I think you commented on one of my reels, I think, and when I went to you to kind of look at your profile, I was like, oh, that's Ed. And then I started digging and I was like, oh my God, there's so much here. So the first thing I saw was your comic book, your graphic novel series. If you're watching, I'm holding them up. If you're not watching, I'm holding up 2 books. They're comic books, High and Horny, Volume 1, High and Horny, Volume 2. And the way that you draw, the way that it's not even your drawing, it's the way you present the story. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I've ever actually read a comic book. I've just not a typical, I guess, I don't know. I just was not a comic book person. Not even like Archie and Veronica, those old comic books. I don't think I've ever read a comic book, but the way that you have presented the story and the way that it's drawn, I don't know the word for it, but it's just creativity beyond what I've seen before. So I just want to say I want to acknowledge and celebrate your creative expression.
Thank you. That's very kind.
You're welcome. So tell me, what got you into graphic novels? And I'm assuming you've always drawn, I guess, from a wee lad.
Yeah, I was always actually making I was always self-publishing, really. I was making little things. I would make trading cards and like picture books and things. And, for a while I was in primary school, what would you call it? Anyway, before high school, that part. I would run home and I would make a storybook to bring in the next day. I got like hooked into this cycle of the adulation and like people enjoying my little stories. And it was fan fiction, really. It was a character I'd seen on TV. And I thought, like, at the time, I didn't know anything about fan fiction. So I was just like, oh, no one must ever know that I've lifted this character from the television. When now I look back and go, no, that's like a very valid form of making art. But yeah, that's how kind of isolated I was. It's always been a very one-person operation, and I really like that independence. I'm not really that interested in working with publishers or anything. I really like doing it myself. But yeah, it's always been like that, and I've always been very productive. I've always been very comfortable with my own company. Just beavering away alone in my room and making up stuff. For who? I don't know. For myself, I've always been my own audience as well. And I make these comics very much just with myself in mind. Obviously, other people are going to be buying them and enjoying them, but I think you can preserve an integrity in your storytelling if you are very clear who it's for, and especially if it's for yourself. That's usually the wisdom that people will give to writers is write for yourself. What would you want to read? Because otherwise you're second guessing. But yeah, that's always come very naturally. And I can't really imagine trying to write for some imagined audience and trying to imagine what they want to see.
I think it's really good advice right there. I think because, there's so many guys that I talk to who are in current active addiction, chemsex, and who are out. And we all have just the stories of a lifetime, right? I mean, the shit that goes on is, obviously, a lot of it's captured in these books, in these comic books, but the shit that goes on is just wild. And there's a lot of people who will come to me and say, I want to write my stories. I want to tell it. But they're really concerned, I think, on who's going to read it. So what you're saying is write it for you. What do you want to read? Is that how you approach all of your art?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if people are thinking about telling their own story, yeah, there's that fear of self-disclosure, and the number of people who, in reviewing this or they post about my work online, they're like, oh, obviously this is his life experience. Obviously this is his own history of addiction. I haven't tried meth and I haven't tried G. I've tried methadone and cat, and it stinks. It's not for me. But these are not my stories. I've drawn on my own experience. I've had lots of group sex situations, and I hope there'll be many more. And I've been to druggy parties, and I've seen the sort of worst kind of homosocial behavior and the best. So there's a lot of emotional truth and emotional experience in these books. Also, it was only when I was inking Volume 2, the penny dropped for me about what they're really about, like what they're really saying about me. And I think if I had figured that out earlier, if I'd figured that out before I embarked on the first one, before I'd finished the first one, I don't know if I would have really been able to see it through. I would have started changing things, and then there would have been that kind of second guessing and thinking about what will other people think of me, rather than just I'm making this because it's what I want to make. So I don't know. Sometimes too much analysis or too much self-knowledge can be a dangerous thing and can impede you from telling a story. So I don't know. If people want to tell their story, they absolutely should. And I do think, for me, I couldn't have made these graphic novels before I went to therapy. So I did therapy in about 2018, and I saw two therapists. I saw two therapists at the same time, which I probably shouldn't do it publicly. Basically, I called up one therapy place, and they took all my details, and they said, okay, we'll call you back in 4 months. I said, what do you mean 4 months? And they said, yeah, there's a waiting list of 4 months. And I said, but I'm crazy now. So I was telling my friend about it, who had experience with homelessness and addiction and therapy, and he recommended somewhere else. So I rang them up, like the same day or the next day, and they took all my details and they said, "Okay, we'll ring you back in 4 months." I was like, so 4 months to the day, they both rang me up, and I just said yes to both of them because I thought, well, I'll try them both, and the one that's good, I'll continue with. Well, they were both good. So twice a week for about 14 weeks, I saw two different therapists,
Wow.
and it was so powerful because I had never, I didn't realize this. This was not something I knew about myself, but I had never told my full life story to somebody and really unpacked everything and gone back over things and come back in the next week and said, oh, that thing I told you last week or 2 weeks ago, we're going back over that again, just to really feel that we'd gone back and forth and covered everything. And, even your most empathetic friend or the best listener, can't really do that for you. They wouldn't really be able to, and you can't really ask that of them, that they just listen and they're not interrupting, they're not offering their take on things, they're not trying to soothe you and go, oh, maybe that person had their reasons for doing that, or they're just not interjecting in any way or taking the steering wheel off of you. And you have that opportunity with a therapist to absolutely tell everything if you want to, if you're ready to. And that was so transformative for me. And only after that was I then able to start the stories, work on them, and finish them. And volume 2 took 16 months of work. And I didn't know I was someone who could work on something for 16 months and be self-motivated for that time and see it through. I didn't know that. I would not have guessed that was something I could do. And if you told me that's how long it was going to take, I would have gone, well, that's too long. I'll do something else. So it was a transformative experience to tell my life story, for me, to absolutely fully self-disclose everything. And in the process, learn things about myself, because whatever stage of your life you're telling your story, obviously your story's got bigger, longer, the older you get, and then your perspective changes. The inner central fades away. And to do it therapeutically with a therapist, you can get the most clarity on it. What I've discovered through volunteering with Controlling Chemsex as a key worker, and as a key worker, or as you put it, it's similar to coaching. I'm spending an hour a week with somebody for 8 weeks, and we're just discussing where they're at, what they want to do, if they want to make any changes, if they're concerned about using chems, whether they want to continue, and if so, how can we reduce harm? And people are telling me stories that they're not telling their husband, they're not telling their therapist, they're not telling their family, and they're not telling work. They're not telling their best friends. Like, these are things that are so powerful and life-altering. Sometimes they've been through some really serious stuff. Sometimes they've done serious things and they've done things they regret. And these stories they're having to keep entirely to themselves until they're talking to someone at Controlling Chemsex. And that's the kind of thing I want to be able to do in the work, is to share those stories that people just wouldn't be able to. And after the books came out, so many people who I know, who, maybe I know through my artwork, maybe I know them through my life drawing sessions, or friends, have contacted me and said, actually, I went through a phase that was a year of my life, or when I was with a partner for a while, we got into this stuff, and they're telling me stories. I had absolutely no idea that they had experience with chemsex or addiction. So to be able to tell stories on behalf of people and to connect people and give people the courage and the perspective and create the conditions under which they can share their stories, that feels incredible. That feels very meaningful. And that's one of the things that keeps me writing these stories, working on volume 3 now.
Wow. Thank you. So what I'm hearing is, in the process of you were double fisting a therapist therapy, which was, I love that. I love that you're doing that. And in through that process, it wasn't just, I mean, telling your story was therapeutic for you, right? Because it sounds like you were telling everybody else's story as you grew up, right? I mean, you were busy telling everyone else's story, but maybe you weren't diving into your own. Does that resonate with you?
Um, Possibly.
Yeah.
I like to think I was there for people and listening to their stories, but yeah,
Well,
I just think
as you created art, though, you were telling other stories, right? And you're saying that you hadn't dove into your own until you went to therapy.
I would say I thought I was expressing myself, but I
Mm.
didn't really know what my story was, so I
Ah,
didn't to tell it. I think
nice.
it'd be more like that. That
Okay,
I was just skimming the surface and not really knowing what was underneath it.
I see. Yeah, great. And through that process, you were able to purge. You were able to really be set free. It sounds like in a way that now through these specific comic books, you're trying to help others feel that same thing, do the same thing. Is that right? Give them the space, give them the opportunity to have their story known, and because it helped you so much. Is that fair?
The reason I write about this stuff is, I mean, so a friend told me, I think back in 2014, um, he told me about this night he'd had, and this story he told me 7 years later. I wrote it down when he told me, and it was 7 years later before I figured out what I could do with this because it was such a compelling story, and I didn't know at the time I wasn't doing comics at all. It was something that one day I'll do it. Well,
Mm.
7 years later I'll be doing it, but I didn't know. So it took that long. And when I got serious about doing comics after I decided to stop doing zines or take my focus off zines and start to do something with a bit more narrative and a bit more kind of heft to it, there a bit more substance to it than just images. Um, my mind went back to this story, and this was the story that became Chill Out, the sort of main big
Mhm.
story in
Mhm.
one, where he was at a chill out, and the host and someone who was clearly, he had history with, they kind of turned on each other in horrible ways. One of them went into a G hole, and the host was
Yeah.
screaming at him and belittling him and
Mhm.
undermining him and
Mhm.
creating a scene, like a horrible, angry,
Mhm.
rude,
Mhm.
invasive,
Yeah.
hostile scene. Um, and eventually, and just not helping this person in the G hole. And eventually, this person in the G hole came round, and the host went into a G hole. And then this guy who'd come out of the G hole started berating him. And just the kind of what that disclosed and suggested about this scene, it was so apocalyptic to me. That just seemed so horrible. And this idea that they were all brought together for hedonism and thrills and to be men and to be gay men just enjoying their bodies together. And then that's happening where actually the darkest, grimmest roots of who they are coming to the surface with absolutely no filter and no attempt to, no empathy, no kindness.
Yeah.
And that was really hair raising. And he was just like, yeah, that happens sometimes. And it was very shocking to me. And he also, a detail that went into the story was, I said, what do you do? And he said, well, no one was helping this first guy. So, me and the guy I was having sex with, well, everyone else just carried on, blinkered, having their hedonistic sex coupled here and there. He and the guy who was having sex with went and helped him, gave him some K, gave him some ketamine. And the guy'd already had perhaps too much G. And well, that's something that I would never do.
Right. Yeah.
It wouldn't occur to me that, like, I think I know what this guy needs,
Right.
more drugs.
Yeah. Right.
I just thought that was the kind of thing that's the kind of detail I put in the story because it's real. It's the kind of solution that someone might think of that I wouldn't. And I'm always trying to differentiate the characters from myself. I'm not trying to make them moral and kind and good and make the right decisions. And, I also don't want people to dodge the bullet all the time. I think it's not what I want to do. I want the characters to catch a bullet sometimes.
Yeah.
Experience consequences without moralizing, without going, see, this is what happens. But I also think it would be disingenuous to say this never or rarely happens, you know.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think if you ask any of us, so for those listening in the US, you've heard me say this, you've heard me make this distinction before, but when Ed says chill out, he just means a party, a group sex party, a chemsex party, a P&P party. They say H&H, high and horny. We say P&P a lot. There's the distinction there. But chill out is just a party, right? Where we're all getting together for chemsex. The stories, I mean, the story you just told about the G-hole going back and forth, I mean, any of us probably that have been in it any length of time can attest that's happened, right? And the fact that no one helps, right? There might be one person sometimes who will step in, but everybody's annoyed because everybody's so horny. You know, you're there to fuck, and then somebody's going crazy, you know, quote unquote crazy, and it's annoying, right? Just like when someone goes into paranoia or psychosis, and it's like, again, right? So I mean, the way that you captured it here, so you were told that story by a friend, and that is what initiated the entire book, is that you wanted to tell that?
Yeah, I mean, this friend, to my knowledge, has actually never done tea either. But I felt it was he was creeping closer and closer. He was circling it and getting closer to it. He was always someone, you know, we've been to lots of parties together, and he never said no to drugs ever. There was a plate or a book going around with lines on it. Even if he'd just done a big fat line, he wanted another one. And you know, I once was at a party, and well, let's just say a friend. Some people might know who some of these people are. a friend was his friends like propped him up. He was so drug fucked that he couldn't sit up to do a line. So his friends like propped him up. Someone held the plate under him. Someone held the straw. And I was like, oh, you know, it'll still be there in 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever. Like maybe wait. And I didn't want to be like, you know, a busybody old lady going, oh, stop doing drugs. But I was just like, I think he's had enough at the moment.
Right.
And I remember that being a bit, yeah, I guess that's going to go into a comic at some point, because I just felt like, really, I'm the only one here who's going, he's good for now.
Yeah.
He's civilized. So my fear for this friend, my anxiety about where he might be headed or where things might work out for him, was what led to the genesis of the book. And it's not, like I've exaggerated things, I've added details. I mean, you know, I've got friends who do sex work or have done sex work, but in volume 2, he turns it down. The character turns down the opportunity to make some money. Whereas I know friends who'd be like, yeah, sure, you know, you're disgusting to me, but you have money. So
right.
This is the time and the place to do it. Right. So yeah, I like I said, differentiating from myself, and then also, you know, creating more dramatically interesting situations. So it's drawn from life, but I'm definitely not trying to completely write anybody's life story or anything.
It's just uncanny to me, though, that this isn't from your personal experience, because you say that you've exaggerated, but I saw nothing. I saw not one thing exaggerated based on my experience, my personal experience. Not one. I mean, not except the only thing I would say exaggerated is a lot of more hard dicks than we ever saw in. You know,
I mean, you've spotted a mistake there, because in volume 1, I didn't really think about that so much, and I tried to show it more in volume 2. But I made some mistake. I also made a mistake with the kind of lighter that I drew. I just drew an ordinary Bic lighter. And I consulted with people. I got them to read through it, and one person was like, "Well, you know, that obviously you'd never use that lighter." And I said, "Why?" And he explained, you know, the kind of lighters he used. And then he also pointed out the hard discs. That's something I'm going to be writing about more. Yeah, I didn't know when I wrote the first one. It's quite typical to be impotent or unable to sustain an erection with meth after a while, especially, or if you're not young.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's common. But but even down, I was telling you before we recorded, even down to the grinder profiles that you make.
Right.
I mean, it's just it's exactly. It's exactly what I'm just shocked that you what a powerful storyteller you are to put those everything in the inferences in. So I would say too to the listeners, I would put a double kind of trigger warning on if you do order the books. They could be triggering for you because this ain't a kid's book. I mean, it's it shows everything, and it shows the drug use and all that kind of stuff. So I would be very cautious about where you are in your recovery before you read them. I was sexually aroused by it. I was surprised because I'm usually not, because there's a lot of people into like animated stuff or AI or whatever. But it's sexually arousing, but luckily I wasn't really triggered by it. And I noticed there wasn't a lot of needles referred to in there either. So which is my own personal. So anyway, okay. So you heard that story. You in care of your friend and where he was going, you started to write these stories. It's almost like, in a way, chemsex fan fiction in a sort of a way. You talked about fan fiction, but not a fan of it, but obviously, but it's almost like that, right? So
I have to say, for someone who hasn't done it, I am weirdly fixated on it.
yeah.
Because I'm always talking about it. Now I do the volunteering,
Right.
it's like 2 hours a week of my time to volunteer with Controlling Chemsex. And then when I'm not doing that, and sometimes during the meeting, I'm like inking a comic, and it's really all I want to write about at the moment. And it probably does seem to an outsider, like, Ed, if this is something you haven't done and you're interested in, why are you so obsessed with it?
Yeah.
I mean, so like I said, so I had that one friend. That's just one of many friends who have experienced it. And as I said, I found out even more friends who involved after I published. I mean, I'm completely immersed in it. You're saying the grinder profiles are very familiar and accurate. Obviously, I've been on Grinder and I've seen this. I've seen the kind of ways that people disguise things and the way they hint at things. We're completely immersed in it. It's all around us. It's happening now.
That's right.
And I remind people of that when I'm constantly talking about it. I was at a party yesterday, and it was all straight people. I think one bisexual person and me. That's what I just ended up talking about that with everybody. Trying to convince them to volunteer for Controlling Chemsex and everything.
Yeah.
So true, it takes up a lot of my attention and my imagination. I mean, so, as the founder of Controlling Chemsex, Ignacio, has been saying, it's probably the biggest healthcare crisis to hit the LGBT community since AIDS. It's massive. It's what it has in common with that is the silence around it as well.
That's right.
It's shrouded in stigma. And silence equals death. We have to talk about it. There are lots of plays on. There's a play called Jock Night on. It's about to start in Manchester, I think, and I saw it when it was in London, and that's really good. But it's a play, that's like it can't really reach all of America and Australia, and I mean, Controlling Chemsex, we're getting clients from India and Asia, and a play can't have the same reach as something like printed media. And also, and film is expensive, and you have to keep all the people funding it happy, and you have to try and reach a broad audience. And there's other media that I could try, but I have always loved to draw. That made the most sense to me. I've always written as well. And this is something that this comics as a format, it's people see it as very lowbrow. It's very kind of easy to access. I mean, if you don't like the drawings, I find it quite difficult to read anything if I don't like the drawings. I can tell at a glance whether I'm going to be able to get through a comic. Usually, sometimes they're really worth sticking with, even if you don't immediately take to the graphics. But writing comics seems like a very good way to raise awareness and to reach people.
Yes.
Who might not go and see a play. I mean, so when I went to see this play Jock Night, I think it was £40 for a ticket, and it was a small play. Well worth that money, and I'm really glad that all of the performers are getting paid. But can a general audience necessarily, will they fork out for something like a play? Will they have £10 or $12 for a comic book? Yeah, or they can, stand there in the store and read it. So, or they can get it from a library. It's also available in libraries. Or they can go to the Tom McFinlan House and read a copy in the library there, if you're in LA. So, yeah, there's other people writing about chemsex and talking about it. And this seems like a really good medium to do it, to really connect with people. And that's accessible, as fantastic as live theatre is, it's not necessarily accessible to a broad range of people. Maybe it's a bit more middle class, a bit more upper class, and it can be expensive.
Yeah, you're right about the silence around this. That's the commonality between this and the AIDS crisis. And any way we can get the conversation going out there, just awareness, like you're talking about being in a party with straight people. So many of the population doesn't understand what's going on around them at all times.
A lot of gay people
and a lot of
people.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked by the comments I get sometimes from gay men who say, "What are you talking about?" Like, you're exaggerating about this. I even a guy in LA, he was like, "I live in LA. I don't know anyone who does." Kim's like, "What?" So yeah, I mean, there's still this.
He does know people who do chemsex.
Yes, he does. That's right.
He knows people who've done it in the past, and he knows people who are going to do it in the future.
That's right. Okay. So why not get the story out in an accessible way, but also a fun way? I mean, if somebody, if you have a family member, even because a lot of what I do are for family members who are totally confused about what is this, right? Because the only thing we know about meth is the trailer park, missing teeth, white trash. We don't that's all we know about meth. We don't know about chemsex or methadone, right? But if you can hand this to someone, a family member, and say, "This is what it is," right? And I would feel very comfortable saying, "Yes, this is exactly this book that I'm holding in my hand. This comic book. This is exactly what goes on, and this is exactly what your loved one is facing." Right. And and you even go into some of the dangers, right? The different personalities that you come across, the different reasons why, and poor Stu really goes through it in the second one. The whole story of what happens to him. I think I just think that it's not glorifying the use. It's really telling in a very raw way what is going on around you at all times in the current state of our community. And I also think one of the problems that we have is that we're not informing the younger guys of what they're getting into. Like even now, because we have this sex positive, whatever, and we don't want to tell somebody not to. Like you say, you don't want to be that. You don't want to be the old marm at the party saying, "I think he's had enough." But the same thing goes with some of these young guys. Is you don't want to say, "Well, don't do that." But if I could give this to young men and look at it, I think they'd have a very clear picture about what they're getting into when they're handed a pipe for the first time, because most of the time they don't have an idea.
Yeah. I mean, I always say lucky, but I have to give myself some credit as well. So when we got the internet, this is how old I am. The internet was something that arrived when I was in my mid to late teens. I think I was 17 when we got the internet at home. And I immediately went looking for gay stuff. And I was always very interested in the sort of darker side of things. And I always wanted to see what I'm not supposed to see, you know, this sense that things were being gate kept from me. And there were things I wasn't supposed to look at. So I was like, right, let's find that first. And there was I think the way I found it, there was a magazine called Bizarre Magazine that I used to get from the corner store. And I think they listed this website in it of like all the gross, weird stuff you could see on the internet. And it was called rotten.com. And it was a really good website where they would have things like morgue photos, and they would have information about horrors of accidents and genocides and all of the stuff, you know, that's too gruesome and too mind-shatteringly awful for polite conversation or for young people to know. And the kind of things that, you know, we either sweep under the rug or we have to to get through the day, we have to not think about those kind of things. And I was like, yeah, show me that. I want to see that. So I go on this site, and one of the things that it had images of and descriptions of was meth and meth mouth. And that, you know, seeing that at 17, that was my first point of contact with meth, was seeing the consequences of it and reading some description about it. You know, it was quite narrow. It was quite simplistic. It was a lot like the photos you get on a cigarette packet of just like, you know, don't do this because that. It was that simple. But that was my first contact. Whereas for so many people, their first contact with meth, maybe at the same age, is someone says, "Oh, if you like weed, well, you could try this as well. I got some of this." Or, you know, it's something where it's presented to them as just an alternative or an option, rather than, you know, this could be the worst decision you ever make in your life, and I wish I had done it. Do you want to do it? You know, or here's a panoply of images for you to peruse. Do you want all of this to happen to you? Here's how that can happen. So that my kind of thirst for forbidden knowledge kind of protected me there, because that was my first point of contact with meth. And I want to be able to provide people with some information that is not dry and kind of finger wagging and do this, but they can read through and it's kind of vicariously experience the kind of things that might happen. And then they have a mental model of where things could go and what kind of paths are available to them. And it might be quite difficult to come back from if they do this.
Yeah. The subtle things, the subtle hints that you have, they're not even hints, but like the guy who was he thought he was supposed to be at work that day, but it had been like a week past and he didn't know, right? Oh, what? I thought it was Friday, but it was like, you know, a Thursday or something like that. The comments about, you know, your dick is raw. You know, this guy telling the other guy, I think your dick is raw or something on his dick or something like that. I mean, there's so many things that you add in there that does explain kind of, you know, this is what it is. It's not just coming together for an orgy. This is, you know, it goes way beyond all of that. So I do think it does a good job of portraying kind of what you're getting into. But like you said, maybe in volume 3, there'll be more limp dicks rolling around. Everybody trying so hard to get hard. You know, that's the typical thing that happens typically, right? I just find it so fascinating, the similarities between the chemsex scene that in Britain, in the UK, Australia, everywhere, and the US. It is based, I mean, this could have been, you could have written this in anywhere in the US, and there's no difference. There is no difference in the scene. I'm sure you've heard that too, right? So you have friends in LA, and you have, I think I remember you traveling to LA. I mean, sure, you've heard that it's the same here, right?
Yeah, I had a client in LA as well, before I went there, recently. I mean, when I first joined Control and Chemsex, I remember we had a discussion about how in the States, it's much more of a heterosexual kind of drug generally. Would you say that's true, or is that just a misperception?
Well, I would say,
because straight people here are not really doing meth, I don't think. It doesn't have the same, you talked about this sort of trailer park kind of reputation, and I don't think we really have an equivalent with meth here. I don't think it's perceived that way.
Yeah, there's a lot more straight people doing it. I mean, maybe even more straight. If you look at the whole gamut of meth being used, I don't know the numbers, but because I'm not, I would say there's probably more straight people using it than gays, I guess. But the way that they use it is so different, right? Like when I have straight men contact me, they might have a sex bender, but it's not that often. But when they do, it's with one person, right? And they don't have Grinder. Like you show in the parties, the guys, while they're fucking, they have Grinder in their face scrolling, right? Like if you're the bottom, you're looking at. Yeah.
I thought I was making that up. I thought that was an exaggeration. I thought I was satirizing. I thought I was being clever. I was like, oh, people love it. And then people pointed out and go, no, that happens. That's what it's like.
Yeah.
I was trying to satirize.
Yeah, it's so hard to let your phone go. For most. But the straight population doesn't have that. And then you have, the rural straight people who are doing it. There's a lot of guys and women doing it for energy, using it to build their business or to keep up their home. I mean, so it's used in a diversified way too. But in terms of the chemsex scene here within the LGBTQ community, what you're describing is the same. I would say there is here, we have what's now called super meth, which is coming out of the cartel labs.
Competitive, yeah.
And so we're seeing a huge spike in psychosis. And usually for most people, psychosis will come later or after you've been up for a while. But what we're seeing is psychosis is stimulated much sooner and more permanently than it has been in the past because of the purity of what we're using, the potency of it. So there are some differences there. I think in your comics, there would be probably more paranoia, like are there, looking out the windows, covering up the smoke detectors in case there's microphones, things like that would be probably more, a little more close to what we experience too.
I'm writing a story that's about paranoia, and it's set in the Tina Triangle. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Yeah.
There's three, for those who don't, there's three tube stations in London that kind of form a triangle in the south of London, south of the river. And anecdotally, where a lot of the meth action happens. And I set a story there, and it's kind of about someone who's been awake for a long time.
Yeah.
In the triangle.
Yeah, I think that honestly does happen more here in the U.S. with the meth here than I hear from any of my UK clients. It is more prevalent in the States for sure. One thing that I would say to you listening is one thing that really helped me early in my recovery was discovering other stories like mine, because it is so silenced. You have men on social media scared to admit it, won't talk about it. For one thing, they have jobs at stake. If there's a stigma around it, right? I found Dr. David Fawcett's podcast. This was back when I first stopped, so back 2018. And then he started telling some anecdotal stories of other men going through the same thing. And I was like, oh, this isn't just me. Like there's other men out there like me, and then I discovered more, of course. But there is such healing anytime that I tell a story, like a raw, unfiltered story from my life on social media. I just get this onslaught of messages and comments saying, thank you so much for saying that. Like, there was one that I talk about digging through the trash for Walmart receipts. So I would go get the receipt, get the merchandise off the shelf and return it for money or a gift card.
You had a video the other day, or I saw the other day, that was incredible. I hope you're okay talking about it, because you posted, like, you introduced somebody to meth.
Yep.
You wrote bad checks on your daughter's account.
Mm-hmm.
You rushed your kids to bed to host an orgy. You just like listed off these things. I was like, this is a John Waters film. It's like a John Waters character.
Yeah.
It's so amazing. And
Yeah.
it is kind of to be able to then tell a story from a position of, you know, it being in the past, to mention it and for it to be mentionable and therefore manageable. And to be able to like laugh at it is so powerful, to be in such a different place. And it is kind of entertaining, the kind of stuff that people will do in this extreme state. They'll do extreme things. That is kind of crazy that you did all that. And I'm so glad you're in a much better place. But we can't let these stories slip through our fingers. This is gold.
That's right.
Told. Not, you know, not to celebrate that kind of behavior. But,
that's right.
You know, that's fierce, iconic diva behavior.
Yeah. That's funny.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Because thank you for saying that, because it does get mixed messages, right? Like there's some like old school marm, in the recovery world, who will come back and say, why are you doing, why are you glorifying what you did? That's a war story. You're not supposed to tell war stories or whatever. And you're just giving people permission to blah, blah, blah. It's not that though. And I also get told that I'm not showing enough remorse, right?
Right.
That I am not displaying their version of what I'm not showing the process that they think I should be going through, in terms of I should be still weeping and crying about it. And no, I want to show what's possible, like you said, in terms of if you lean into it and you process through that and you forgive yourself. And you make amends with, I had to, make a lot of amends with my kids, and other people too. I mean, when you go through that process, you come out on the other end and you don't feel the remorse anymore. But I just have these men, they message me and they're just like, you will never believe what I did. I just cannot ever admit to what I did. And then when they mention what they did, I'm like, that was a Tuesday for me. Like, what are you talking about? Right. But so in saying that out loud on social media, it does give them it sets a lot of people free from the guilt and keeping it inside. And I think what you're doing here is the same. Right. And like you said, you're telling their story in a way that you're like, yeah, that's right. That sets me free. I don't have to feel guilty about that anymore. I don't have to keep it to myself. I don't have to be, and a lot of guys still have nightmares over chill outs or party situations, like the G hole, right? Remember the guy saying it's G o'clock in your comic book. That was the first time I've heard G o'clock, but yeah, I mean, seeing people go through G holes or going through one or all that other stuff. I mean, those things can cause PTSD and nightmares. And so seeing it like you're presenting it could be very healing for a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's it. In telling your own story or telling stories, you're giving people permission to tell their own and to therefore process it and see it as a story and restructure it and reframe it as something that happened that can be spoken of, and that in speaking about it, it is helpful for other people and can help them avoid getting there and can help them process and get out of it. So it is massive. I find in my life drawing work, I run a life drawing group every week, and I sometimes forget how much people really need to be given permission to draw. And they need to be given permission to tell their stories. They already have it. No one's gatekeeping it. No one should need to tell them like, oh yeah, you can chime in. And also another thing that a lie that we tell ourselves is that my story is not interesting or
That's right.
My story is not valid. No one would be interested in mine, or mine's not different enough from existing stories to matter. It does matter. It's your story. And yeah, I think it's very, incredibly powerful and can be transformative to tell it. And in telling it, you have the opportunity to write the next chapter. You have the opportunity. It's not finished, it's not to till the fat lady sings. And so it's important to begin telling it somewhere and see how much detail you're ready to add, and see how it makes you feel to tell it. Who you tell it to or how you tell it, that's something to find out. But a therapist is a good one to start with. Yeah. And like I said, I have clients who they're completely leaving out this side of their life. They're telling their therapist about their upbringing, their childhood, their partner, their workplace, absolutely everything, except the fact that every few weeks they're going and having this drug-fueled sex, and their boundaries are not being respected, and maybe they're not respecting other people's boundaries, and they are ill for a week afterwards. Like, it's quite a lot that you're missing out, that you're glossing over.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yeah. And why you keep going back. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the therapist can help you peel that back, right? Why you keep doing this?
Analyze it, understand it. Understand the story that you're telling. Because again, like, it's storytelling techniques really help you break down and understand your own life. So in writing these stories, like, I then was able to apply these things, like, in every story, pretty much every story, if you can find one that doesn't have these beats in it, then, well done. But most stories have a section of it, or these story beats of orphan, wanderer, warrior, martyr. So in the beginning of the story, usually in the beginning, and they're usually in that order, but of course it can be mixed up, but most stories that exist that you've ever heard, and stories that you tell yourself, go through this process. And so in the beginning of the story, maybe in a Pixar story, I always go with those because everybody knows them, and they're sort of, and they're often quite simple. Usually at the beginning of a Pixar story, someone falls over, and by doing so, it changes everything, because kids' motor neuron skills, their motor skills are still developing. So that's very relatable to them, and the idea of disaster being around the corner is very relatable to them. So someone or it'll be a literal orphaning, like in the beginning of Finding Nemo. He's literally orphaned, and then his father becomes the main character when he's orphaned, because his kid is kidnapped and taken to Australia, and so then there's wandering, there's searching for the missing fish, and then the warrior part, there has to be some kind of conflict in a story somewhere, really, for it to be a good story, for it to be a story. So there's usually someone standing up to something, or some kind of fight, whether it's just a disagreement or it's a physical fight. And then a martyr, something has to die, whether that's the old order, whether that's your lifestyle, whether it's your ego has to die. Something has to change very radically. Something has to be martyred, has to die for the cause, for some kind of betterment, for something better to take place. And to start thinking, well, how does that apply in my own life, can really help you reframe things, and really help you see that you're on a path, and that the story's not finished. I remember in my 30s, I kind of thought it was all over. I thought I'd missed the boat. That was a phrase I kept using. I'd dropped off. I'd failed, because the business I was doing, I was working as an artist in a different medium. And the economy caught up to Clubland. I was working in clubs, and there was no money to pay me for what I was doing. So I was like, well, I'm a failure. I failed. I was not really looking at the fact that very few people were making any money doing what I was doing. And I've been paying rent with it. So I've been doing okay, but all I could see was that now I failed, and it's all over. And I'm too old to start again, and I'm not young anymore. And I had all my chances, and they were blowing them all. So stuff like that, I do try to translate that, and I do try to empathize with my characters that might feel like that, and people that I'm supporting in controlling chemsex. You can tell yourself this story, that you're at the end of the story, that it's finished, it's over, or you can tell yourself the truth, which is that the story's not finished, but maybe there's been these 4 story beats, and it's time to begin a new story. It doesn't mean that your life story is over. It doesn't mean that whatever you've experienced, you've survived it. If you like to tell the story, you have survived it, and you can start a new story or improve the one that you're living.
Wow, I love it. I really like this template, for us, like orphan, wanderer, warrior, martyr, in that order, right? Because if you think about an orphan, you're orphaned in the beginning of chemsex, probably because you lose your friends, you lose your family, you lose yourself, right? and then you wander around, and then you have to be a warrior in recovery, and then something has to die, which is your past, right? And you can start that over. Start that over in recovery, right? You're orphaned because you don't have that part of you anymore, the chemsex part. Could be one way to look at it. I love, yeah. So, I mean, if you are listening and you really want to tell your story, what a great template that Ed has given you. What a great archetypes for you to think about, and how that applies to your life, and how you can see yourself in those positions, if position is the right. You call it a beat, but in those archetypes, how have you gone through them? Where are you in that process? And then how can your story continue? What a great way to get started for someone who wants to tell their story.
There's another thing I learned from studying storytelling as well, which I think does apply to your life. And is it just another way maybe to reframe how you're living your life, which is that in any film or novel that you've read, all of the characters are reflecting a facet of the main character.
Mm-hmm.
So the villain is the worst aspect, or the thing that the main character, the protagonist, fears being, perhaps, doesn't want to turn into. Like in Star Wars, the villain, the antagonist, turns out to actually literally be his father and is everything he doesn't want to be. But he offered, do you want to, you can join me, you can be like this. So it's, in that story, it's laid very clear. And then, the slutty best friend or whatever is reflect the sexuality of the main character. So much work is done in stories to make sure the main character is likable and relatable. I try to push against that a bit in my stories, because I love films and books and things where the characters are quite hard to like, and they feel much more real. They don't feel sanitized. But that's something, when you think of your own life, when you think, how does everybody in my life reflect who I reflect as I mean, not in a solipsistic way of like, I'm the only real person, everyone else is a sort of a reflection. But what are they reflecting in you? What do they represent in your life? That can be really helpful, I think, and constructive in thinking where you want your story to go next, and who should stay and who should sashay away in your life.
Yeah, great. I love that. Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, earlier you said, what is this comic book? What is this graphic novel? What is this project saying about me? You said. And you didn't know what it was saying about you until volume 2. So what is it saying about you?
I'm not going to be too open about exactly what it means. Just because, I think it's a mistake to explain your work too much. I mean, everyone who reads it, it's going to mean something to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you hope. And people do bring a lot to the work. People have said things like, oh, it's so sad because Stu's just looking for love.
Right.
And I'm going,
he is.
Okay. A straight person said that, I think. And I was like, oh, sure. Yeah, we all are. That's what gays are really, that's what we're all about. We don't want a mouthful of cum. We just want love.
Right.
Okay. But that was a completely fair and valid interpretation of it. And the person in my life who inspired that character actually is very romantic and very sort of falls very easily to people. So that was fair. But I kind of thought, like, that's not what I wrote. So people will bring their own perspective on things, and it's so interesting for me. It's so eye-opening, and I learn how to be a better writer from it. What this story, the penny that dropped when I was inking volume 2 was that this, of course, is a product of my own trauma. Like my own trauma was kind of writ large in there, in ways that it became just really clear to me. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure a psychoanalyst could point it out quickly. And that put me off, I think, writing stuff for a long time, or maybe not put me off, but intimidated me. Of like, what does this say about me? Like, what does it say about who I am? And I think just as I eased into my 40s, I'm now 43. you just stop giving a fuck, and you're like, well, that's who I am, and
Yeah.
everybody's something. We all have issues. I think that was another thing that therapy helped me with, of like feeling like it was a dark secret to have baggage or to have trauma unresolved, and trauma that was being resolved, and intrusive thoughts, and to ruminate and things like that. I thought this was this shameful thing that no one must know. And like, no, it's like that's all normal. Like, you wouldn't be a human being if you didn't have that. So that's, I guess, all I can tell you is that my own traumatic roots, my own backstory is suggested in there.
I see.
By some of the action, but not not the sexual side of it, and not the drug side of it. It's something else. It's more about a dynamic. There you go. It's more than anyone's got out of me. So
now I'm going to reread and try to figure this out.
I had to read it hundreds of times before I figured it out.
Yeah.
So, tell me what you come up with.
Okay, I will. What do you want someone who reads these? Well, actually, someone who looks at any of your work, because I saw cards, like they were greeting cards, I guess, right? There was one where the guys, postcards. You sent me this one. I'm holding it up in the camera if you're watching. Very, just very well done. There's some with buttholes on them, anuses and stuff like that. So, what do you want someone to leave your work feeling? Like, what impressions do you want us to get from what you produce?
From the graphic novels, the comics?
Yeah, let's go there specifically. Like, once I read these, what do you want the impression to be? What do you want me to leave with?
Ideally, the way that I write is so that people are thinking about it. If you just give people all the conclusions, then they're not really required to think about it.
Right.
And if you show people behaving badly, and if you show an ending to the story that doesn't necessarily conclude it, doesn't wrap everything up neatly, people have to think about it. They have to think, like, did that character do the right thing? Would I have done that in that situation? Was he a victim? Did he, bring that on himself? I want there to be some kind of debate in people, and I want it to stay with them in that way. I want them to really have to pick over what they just saw, what they just read. And ideally, I'd like them to read it at least twice. With a comic or graphic novel, I do this as well. The first time you read it, sometimes you just jump from speech bubble to speech bubble.
Yeah.
And you just sort of skim through the text.
Yeah.
And that can be because it's a very propulsive narrative and you're really drawn in. But it can just kind of be a habit of just thinking that the text is where the meat, the substance is, and the drawings are just illustrating what you're already reading. I definitely find that on my second reading, I take much more time looking at each panel. And sometimes you see there's a whole other narrative going on, or what you had assumed from reading the text. Actually, you can assemble a different narrative when you really include the details. And there are details in there that I hope definitely add inflections to the story. There's things like in volume 2, when he's on the come down, I really wanted people to experience something like a come for that section. And that's where he's thinking such dark thoughts that it's over. He's like, he's totally fucked up everything irreparably, and there's no going back, and there's no point, and just to feel so kind of hollowed out, and to kind of be obsessed and fixated on the idea of having totally failed, totally fucked up, and to be irredeemable. I really wanted that. I really wanted people to feel that. So there's details in the background, like there's a violinist with a broken arm, which is just something I saw in a video, and I was looking for crowd scenes, and people post all kinds of things to YouTube, and someone had just walked through London with a camera, and when I paused, I just saw this violinist with their arm in a cast. Like, what's that? What's her story?
Yeah.
What's happening to her now? Yeah. Is she taking it to like sell it or something? Is she giving it away? Or is she going to be fine? Maybe she just had an operation to maintain. Maybe that's not the arm she plays with, so maybe everything's fine. But it was kind of like, oh my God, that person. I was going to do something more overt as well. I was going to have a child crying over a dropped ice cream. And then I realized like, you probably wouldn't have that on a rainy, cold day in London. So I had to find other ways to show that. And I also wanted to tie it in with how the city and the world is changing. So there's like adverts for luxury flats in the background and people have defaced them. There's an old couple, one is pushing the other in a wheelchair, and I just wanted it to be kind of enigmatic image that might mean different things to different people, because it's beautiful that they're together late in life and they have each other, but some people also might see that's very sad, might find it depressing to see, you know, that we all deteriorate. But there's an incredible film called Amour by Michael Haneke. He's my favorite director, and he's a writer-director as well. And one of his films is about a couple at the end of their lives, and one is looking after the other one because that's what happily ever after has to look like, right? Yeah. If you're together to the end of your lives, one of you is going to go before the other. Maybe you both die in your sleep side by side and it will all be perfect and peaceful, but more likely one of you is going to be deteriorating at a faster rate than the other, so the other one is put into a role of a carer. And this film is so powerful, has been very influential on me, because that just sounds like a tragedy. It just sounds like it's going to be a miserable experience and it's going to leave you crying your eyes out. And when I watched that film, it takes you on this emotional journey where there's tension, there's drama, there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's so much love and empathy in it. And you get to the end of the film and I was sort of in this suspended state and I didn't know what to feel. And I found myself going through scene by scene, and I can remember so much of that film, and I just watched it the once. I don't know when I'll watch it again. I will. I love his films. So that's the kind of thing I want to do in my stories, even though it could very easily be just a sort of tragic narrative that just sort of charges downhill, and leaves the reader weeping. I want there to be more to it, and I want you to have to digest it slowly. I want it to not be easily consumable. I want it to kind of stick in your throat.
Yeah. So
you have to come to your own conclusions and maybe you can't as well. Maybe it's something that you can't resolve in your mind of how you really feel about it. But yeah, I always want to use imagery and text combined, so that there are little things that you notice that might make you feel different things, and the overall effect leaves you with a lot to think about, and you remember it, and you might want to recommend it to other people.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That really helps me understand how better to digest it, and I think anyone listening how better to digest art, period, right? Any type of art. We're just all in this hurry, in this instant gratification type society we're in. We just want to get through stuff, right? Like flip through the comic book or the movie or whatever. But to really look at it that way, through that lens, I think that's so nice. That I love the way that you put that. That's really helped me.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I find it really hard to excerpt bits of the comic. I'm sometimes asked. There's an exhibition happening in Vienna next month, and they asked me for some excerpts of the comic to show, and also I showed some here in London while I was in LA. Some pages from the comic were shown, and I find it so difficult to present things out of context, because it might just be triggering. It might just if you just look at if you just take a small excerpt, you might think that this is a story where people just take drugs and it's great. And
right, exactly.
I've constructed it so that you really do need to see the whole thing to really know what it is. So I do find that very hard. In terms of digesting it as well, I want to say that this tradition we have of baking a coin into a Christmas pudding. You do that in the States as well?
I've never heard of it. They might be done here, but not in my country, not in my part of the world.
Okay. Well, in the UK, there's a tradition of baking a sixpence or some money into the Christmas pudding,
Okay.
and the purpose of that is so that you eat it slowly, because this is a pudding into which it would be a very expensive dish. There's a lot of like vine fruits and dried
Okay.
fruit and nuts baked into
Mm.
this thing. So traditionally, it would be a very expensive dessert, but because it's very sweet and you just get you get a slice amongst a whole family, maybe you just wolf it down. So this promise of like might break your teeth on this thing,
Right.
so the reward.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I want to have in my
Mm.
work. Something to break your teeth on, so that you
Yeah.
chew it.
I love that. I love it. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Wow. It's a lot. Yeah. I just think also I was kind of half expecting a happy ending, like, as you read it, like, oh, he comes to his senses, he goes to rehab. I don't know, something like that. And it isn't, right? It's totally left up to your interpretation in terms of, happy or sad, I guess. But it's not the typical what I think people would want, right, out of a story. And I myself really like that, because I'm a big fan of movies without happy endings, movies with real endings, like one of my favorite romances is these go way back and show my age too, but Bridges of Madison County,
Oh yeah,
where they don't end up together, right?
right.
She decides to stay with her husband, and that to me was like, this is a real ending. Like, this isn't the story of, they run off together and they're happily ever after. This was a true ending, and then she kept it to herself her whole life, and I just, yeah, so I really resonated with the way that you ended volume two as well. Oh, well, both volumes. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Mhm.
There's also I don't want to make a spoiler, but in one of the stories, at some point, someone possibly gets an HIV diagnosis, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't want that to seem like an ending, because it isn't. But that's another thing that can feel to people like it's all over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just absolutely not. It's a completely manageable thing. Again, that's another thing that I have not experienced. I think people assume, again, that's part of my story. I have so many friends who are HIV positive, and they keep going. They're
Yeah.
happy, they're healthy.
Yeah.
But when you get the news, that's never a good feeling. So that was something that I put in one of the stories, again, because it was emotionally powerful. But if you know people with HIV, that's not an ending. It's not a death sentence.
Right.
It's
Right.
not a punishment or something. It doesn't have to be terrible at all. It can just be like, okay, well, now I'm dealing with that as well.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
with it.
This is new information for me. And that's it, right? This is new information for me in my life, and I'll make adaptations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, Ed, what have I missed? What do you think I should have asked you that I didn't? Or what information did we not put in the podcast that you wish had have been?
Well, I had some questions for you, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's some things I've been thinking of that would be interesting to discuss with people. So I don't know if your listeners and viewers would be interested. What do you think of this idea of a proposal? What do you think of the idea of a new stripe being added to the progress flag for people in recovery?
I I like that idea. The first
Yeah.
thing that comes to mind is it's less where you are. There's more of this here in terms of there's a lot of people who are projecting their definition of recovery onto others,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in terms of, if I am meth free but I still drink alcohol, I'm not allowed to say I'm in recovery, according to some.
Okay.
Right. This is to me is an older type philosophy that I hope in time goes away more and more. But the only thing that comes to my mind is, how do I identify what that stripe right? Which to me is, if you're in recovery, you're in recovery. You get to decide, right? And just
Yeah.
because you're right. But no, I like that idea quite a bit, because there's so much camaraderie, right? And there's so much identification with each other when you say, I'm in recovery. Oh, you are too, right? Like there's this instant bond. So I think having that would be another way to bring us together.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question I thought was appropriate to this because it's an image, and flags do tell a story. They're
That's
about,
right.
kind of a shorthand way of signifying a group and a story and a shared story. Yeah, I just,
I
I
also
wondered.
think, that's now that I'm thinking about it, that would be a very interesting, I think, powerful way to bring all the recovery routes together. Like, we have Dharma recovery, we have refuge recovery, smart recovery. We have
Mm,
all kinds of different routes to recovery, plus the 12, of course, the 12 steps or your own. But I do think, something like that could that could be something that brought us all together into one. If we had a stripe like that, a signal, a integrated symbol of what at our core, who we all are, no matter what route you're taking. So yeah.
yeah, and it's a significant, amount of people in the LGBT
Oh yeah.
community. There's a lot.
Oh
There's a
yeah.
lot of substance abuse going on. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Sure. I mean, the roundup, there's 12 steps have a roundup, where it's a conference, they're just having it now, I think, in Florida. And I went last year. It was like 600 gay men, well, queer people, I guess you could say, but 600 of us together in recovery. And there were some people that were in other, I think it was a very small percentage, but in other programs. But yeah, something like that could be, yeah, that could really hopefully bring us all together and drop our differences. It's kind of like, it's almost like churches, denominations of churches. What brings them all together? The symbol of the cross. At the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully, a Presbyterian can, drop their differences with a Catholic or whatever, because the cross actually binds them all together. So something like that, I think, would be very nice. Yeah, very impactful.
What color do you think it should be?
What color's available now? I have to.
Yeah, might have to be. Maybe it should be a cross. Maybe we should put a big crucifix on. They love that.
Yeah,
Make everyone happy.
that would go really
Um,
well. Go over really well.
I have another question I thought of as well. I mean, you maybe you want to edit these out because they're not on top. So I don't know. They're both kind of storytelling related questions.
Mhm.
And so the second thing I wanted to ask was, so in controlling chemsex, in the key working, one of the things we do is cravings management, and we talk through this as we talk with them. We ask them, what kind of cravings do you experience? Where do you feel it in your body? Like, what kind of things trigger you? And we talk about cravings management as in how can you break that chain of events so that you're not using. You have the craving, and then you have the action eventually. And how do you break that? And we have various things, opening a window, going for a walk, having a shower, listening to music or calling someone or whatever it is to just like break the concept. And one of the things that we suggest is that you have an emergency jerk. You jerk off. And I'm interested in what can we call that? I mean, that's what I've been calling it. The emergency wank is a British
Emergency
version.
wank, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe your viewers would have a great idea for what to call that. Masturbating as a method of keeping yourself from using, as a way to focus or distract your mind.
Yeah.
Break that cycle.
Yeah. That's an interesting question too, because it is, again, universal, right? I mean, one of the first things I'll ask, and I've said it in the podcast before, have you jerked off? Have you wanked? Have you masturbated? Masturbated, I guess, is the word that would be the most common, right? Have you masturbated? If you're calling me and you're having a big craving, have you done that yet? That's going to be my first question. So, which there are also some clinicians here who disagree with that. And that they think, and they think if you get into the habit of masturbating, that it actually makes the craving grow
Right.
a little further down the line, because you are starting to think about sex, and you're starting to think, visualize and fantasize through the masturbating. So there's some people that disagree with that. I just have seen it so many times, that post nut clarity that comes, right then and there, that you're like, oh yeah, what am I doing? Right? Oh yeah, I don't want to do that.
Released.
Right.
You're released from this sort of inexorable slide into doing something and pursuing contact with people that wouldn't be helpful right now.
Yeah. And there's a part of you, like when I ask you, have you jerked off? There's this part of you that doesn't want to, because subconsciously it's going to end it, right? Because there's part of you that doesn't want to end this tractor beam. It
feels like a waste. It feels like, or sometimes I think it feels like you're kind of throwing something away that's so special in life. It's so amazing. Like, but that special, amazing thing is basically going to just ruin my day.
That's right.
in my case, sometimes you have things to do, and you just like really want to be distracted all day, and maybe at the end of it get this reward that I'm hoping deep down is there.
Right.
And maybe I will have wasted the day, and I won't get it anyway. Or I could just have a short 15-minute enjoyment now.
Yeah.
Won't be spectacular and mind-blowing, but then, and it's weird how I can kind of, without having a discussion with myself, can basically just talk myself out of that and just go, that would be a waste.
Right.
But you're right. There's also like not wanting to get out of the cycle, really.
Yeah, you have to, it's a good assessment of where you are with it, in terms of how much do you want to use, and how much do you really want it to be over? Are you ready? Are you willing to do what it takes, which is go jerk off, right? I don't know what you would call that. That'd be a good question we can pose for the listeners, to come up with some creative name that would be, recognized globally.
I thought of the only thing I could come up with was like a phrase was like pulling the ripcord.
Have you pulled the ripcord?
Yeah, I think that kind of works. But so
I did have it. Yeah, well, I did have a client who called it the nut and block, when he would get random text from old user friends. Hey, where you at? I think is how you. What did you start with? Oh, WYD is how you started the one book, right? Your volume 2, I think. What are you doing? Is the question mark in the thought bubble. But when you get that WYD or what's up or whatever, what they want, right? So he'll nut and block. He goes and jerks and blocks them, because that for him was his particular big trigger, was because it was always some guy who was extra fun, extra hot, doesn't use that much, so he's not I don't know, he's not the typical user, and it's always somebody who makes it so hard to say no to, right? He called it the nut and block. But I don't know. We should really explore that, because that's one of my. I did a podcast on if I had to start over, what are the 7 meth-free blueprint is what I called it. I guess 7 something. I forgot what it was called. Anyway, it was 7 things I would do over if I had to start over again, right? And one of them was I would masturbate. Like as soon as I woke up, I would masturbate. I would masturbate at the end of the day. I would masturbate in the middle of the day if I had to, right? And of course, this isn't the rest of your life. You don't have to do that. But I'm talking about early chemsex recovery, the first 90 days. It will clear your mind. It will clear the cache out, as is a way of saying it, and help you get back online real quick.
And I think it's one of the things that because that's not normal. I think people are trying to get back to normality, and they want normal. They want to have the same kind of sex life. That doesn't seem like the right thing to do, but it's it's worth thinking about. Like for my recovery, I have to have this medicinal kind of intervention with myself.
That's right.
Or the therapeutic. And I think there's an opportunity for some storytelling there as well. It's like to make it enjoyable. It's like, I have to do this first thing in the morning. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I get to do it. You could change that to I get to do it. Yeah. I get to I get to come.
Whatever is sexiest or whatever is most appealing to someone.
Yeah. 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 And
That's
I mean,
fun.
eventually, right. And eventually, there is the issue of sexual reintegration, right? Because there's a lot of trauma, and sometimes your dick doesn't even work anymore. Libido is up and down. So there's this whole idea of sexual reintegration, getting into sober sex. Do I want to do kinks anymore? Am I into fetishes? All that, all those topics we've gone over here. All of that can be addressed later, right? But for now, and it's not going to because sexual reintegration for the most part with chemsex is going to require mindful masturbation, where
Yeah.
you're just touching your body and exploring it, what feels good without porn, and all this kind of, like, you can get to that later. But definitely in the first 90 days, well, maybe even farther, but you're going to have to do that. I mean, it's my first question always when a guy contacts me and says, I have a craving. I can't manage it.
Mm.
Sometimes it takes twice, depending. So,
Yeah. I've also had clients who said, like, it doesn't help,
yes.
and that's a tough situation to
Yeah.
be in.
Mm-hmm.
Knocking one out doesn't reduce your desire to get into it. I wouldn't want to. Yeah. It's so kind of tragic that chemsex can kind of weaponize your own sex drive against you in this way. It's like, this is one of the things I think that drew me to the topic, that it's so kind of tragic. And I'm kind of a sexual person myself, and if you guessed, and I think that something that drew me to this subject is I do feel that there, but for the grace of God go I. Like, it's weird that I didn't get messed up in this. And like I said, if I hadn't kind of gone online and gone looking for information that I felt I wasn't supposed to know, or felt was dangerous, subversive information, if I hadn't gone looking for it, then I definitely would have walked right into meth. It would have happened at some point, because I was interested in drugs and getting out of my head, and I had trauma to block out, and I came to London for adventure, and as a lot of people do, and that's one of the adventures that is very readily available.
Oh, yeah.
So I do kind of really relate to this idea of how terrible it would be if something that's so pure and pleasurable, and it is already kind of tainted by trauma for gay people, for LGBTQ people, it's already tainted by, kind of heteronormative, traumatic, disparaging ideas about what's normal and what's proper sex and sexuality. And then you manage to find your footing and have a sex life and find your own space and your own people. And then this drug complicates and immiserates everything for you. It's just, it does. I feel it. I feel very compassionate about it. And it's huge. It's all around us. Right. It's very current. It's very relevant. It's not spoken about enough. And I just feel that, like, I dodged that bullet. It grazed me. And I'm sort of mystified in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't happen to me. I've overdone so many things in my life. And I just managed to step back from the brink when it comes to chems.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you feel called, because you're doing good work and big work. And I think a lot of healing work for a lot of people. So thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it very much.
And thank you. You're doing great work as well. I'm really enjoying your videos and the content that you're doing, and the interviews and the podcasting. It's great stuff.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Did you have any other questions for me?
That's all I could come up with. You're very interested to know if your viewers have any thoughts on those things.
Oh yeah, we'll get it. You'll get feedback for sure. Yeah.
Okay, but be nice, people. I've seen some brutal comments on your posts.
I know. Yeah. I get a lot of hate. But I've just learned to heart the comment. What I will say, I'm learning to just heart the comment and move on. Sometimes it gets the best of me, and I start replying back, and it's always a mistake. But I'm trying not to now. Just let them have their opinion. Everybody's allowed to have their opinion. But it gets really personal too. But it's expected. But
Yeah.
well, thank you for spending time with us today. Appreciate that. And we're going to put your website in the show notes. So if you're interested in looking at Ed's work and his art, you can go there and take a look. You can order, and it can be delivered in the U.S. Like I said, just be mindful. It is very graphic. It's very sexual. It's drug use in it. And so just keep that in mind. I'm not saying go out and get it, but I'm saying listen to yourself. And if it's something that you think would help, or something that you think would help others, go ahead and order it, please. But there's other things that Ed has done too that I think would be enjoyable for a lot of you out there listening. So with that being said, we're going to end it here, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.